Since he kind of has a little bit of a clown nose, let's just put a couple holes underneath. And for this one I'm using a really small number 9. Kind of just do an indentation up here for nostrils. I'm just going to kind of go up, offset at the center, take it in, another one offset roughly the same place on the other side, and just go in. And then come up with my knife and take those chunks out. Now he's got nostrils underneath. And you can play around with a little bit if you want to round a little bit here. Kind of want that to change a little bit. The upper lip, I didn't spend a lot of time rounding that. You can play with it a little bit till it suits your liking. So his upper lip's a little bit more round. And the term I've heard used, and it's kind of stuck because of the term, is that little indentation in your upper lip that goes from your nose down to the top of your lip is a snot trough. So, makes sense. It's where the snot usually runs down when you're sick, or when you got a runny nose from hay fever or some other kind of allergy. And you can put something in like that. It can be broader, it can be narrower. It actually varies from people to people too. One of the things, if you start carving faces, or if you've already been carving faces, you learn that all faces are different and things are shaped a little bit different. You almost can't go wrong carving. The only thing you can really go wrong with is if you're asymmetrical. So if for some reason you can't get one side to look like the other, then you might have some concerns. Alright, we're getting pretty close to what I might consider done. I'm going to go up here and around the outside of his ears a little bit because it's a little easier now. Go do the insides a little bit after I get this part done. So you kind of curl the outside so you don't have corners on his ears. And fitzing with this is just one of those things that you can definitely spend time doing, whatever you're most comfortable with. All I'm trying to do is give you a technique, and hopefully you'll run with it. I always encourage experimentation. Where's my curved gouge? Alright, we got the shape. First part was to mostly do it. That this shows you kind of where you want to have an ear. Now you can go back and kind of refine it a little bit. Sometimes I'll put a little bit of a cup, like you're doing the inside of a spoon, to kind of curve into the ear. There's no reason to make this try to look human, because, well, it's not. But you can play around with some of the features of it to suit whatever you're comfortable with. So right now I'm trying to take the inside to be close to the outside. And you might chip off, so I got to be careful. One of the things to do toward the top and the bottom is to approach it this way, because you're going with the grain. So cleaning the inside of the ear out a little bit by little bit. As you approach the edge though, you want to be careful about breaking things out. So I'm carefully coming down from the top, so I'm getting a lot of a point there by going this way. The same thing's true of the other ear. This way, because I'm cutting into the grain, going with the grain, instead of going against it, it shouldn't break on me unless I start doing it like a lever and start prying on it. So for the ends, this is the best way to approach it. You just still want to be careful. Don't need to take too much too fast. And then once you've gotten down in this area, you can kind of come in. One way that kind of works, or at least it's worked for me, is to take one side and then come in on the other side. And you have pretty much the insides of the ears. Again, I can get a little bit more separation on the outside with the gouge a little bit more, because they still seem to have a little bit more fleshy here. So I want to make those ears stand out a little bit more away from the head. Yeah, he doesn't look too bad. I'm sure I've done worse. Could do worse. Alright, next thing I do is work on the inside of the ear. And this is another small number 9 gouge. And what I do is I put a little curve for that little flap that's inside your ear, which is right where your ear goes into your ear canal. And you could put it in the center, you could put it down a little bit. It's just, that's going to depend on you. But what I'm doing is I'm taking the flat side, it's going to be against my thumb. So if you think of the opening here is going to roll against my thumb. So I'm looking at making an upside down curve. Now I'm going to push it straight into the piece. And you're going to end up with a curve like that.
Okay,
Can you see it?
Yep.
And the same thing's true on the other side. And again, same kind of curve. Don't have to be 100% perfect. And again, this is how I do it. I don't know that if anybody else carves these things the same way I do, then more power to them, or good luck, or whatever tends to work. Now I'm going to make a thin slice from the top all the way down to the bottom. So I'm going to start at one corner of that. I'm going to come up. I'm going to come in at an angle and take a slice out. And if I do this right, it'll pop right out. And since it's never really done it before, it's unlikely I'll do it right. And again, for a cut like this, do not rush it. It doesn't help any to go fast. And in fact, what I'm doing right up here could go right through the ear. And you could have a finger on the other side. So you can come back and cut this a few more times until you get to cut where you want it. Actually, I cut it this way, so. And at some point, this should come free. There we go. And that whole wedge comes out. And while I cut it a couple times, which doesn't leave as clean a finish as I was hoping for, what you have looks kind of like the inside of an ear if it were pointed at the top and bottom. So, try to do the exact same thing on the other side. Maybe angle the knife a little bit more this time. And don't rush this cut. Like I said, this can be a dangerous cut if you push it too fast. You don't have to be 100% looks perfect with it. Just do the best you can if you try to do this. Again, you might come up with a way to use a gouge to end up with some of the same type of look that I'm working on. You may come up with a whole different way to do the inside of the ear. That's what's fun about wood carving. Everybody's got a different idea.
Now, can you say that again? It sounded more like Ross, the painting guy.
I haven't watched enough of the Bob Ross to know exactly how he does that.
It's just a happy little ear.
Just a happy, there you go. It's just a happy little ear. So this has only helped clean up the carving. But the ears are done. So as you can see, it's got that little bump like a human ear does. If I haven't chipped all of it, well, it looks like I might have chipped a little bit of that off. Now, and that's the risk that you run by doing this. Cut back into this a little bit, get a little bit more of a groove. Slicing cut when you cut into grain like I am usually helps it go a lot easier without hurting anything. And I can bring this with the grain. He could be cleaned up a little bit, but for the most part, he's along the way. Now hair, we can go into hair. We've got some time. And for that, I usually bring out a really tiny U-gouge, because since I'm already dealing with a tiny character, I'm going to use a little gouge like this, which I don't know how well that's going to show, But if you can see it in profile, it's just a really tiny U, like a lot of the other U gouges, since number 9 seems to be the main gouge that I use. And the easy way to do this, if I think about it in advance, which I don't usually do, is to put a nice deep little cut up under the hat. And you want to be careful because you're not trying to slice anything, so you don't want to pull the knife or have it run out. Now what I've done is cut the wood in, and the reason for that is when I use my tiny little gouge, I start to do hair, the hair will just fall off instead of leaving little nubs up there. Now to do hair, and this isn't a perfect way, I've seen better ways to do hair, is that you want to angle them right and left off of straight, because you don't want to do them all parallel. Hair, no matter how much you comb it, never lays exactly that way. If it did, we'd look, I don't know, artificial. But you can see how it's all, because of that cut I just made, it all comes free without me having to go back and recut it. So those all just brush right off. And going over the curve, we're losing a lot of our light, so I don't know how much you can see.
We're still good.
So kind of angle it a little this way, a little bit that way. Try to make sure that you don't leave any of the original surface. So you want it to, and you run a deep one every so often, some shallow ones, all of that kind of helps. I'm not going to worry about him being too refined on this guy, because I can always cut him loose when I get home on the bandsaw, and I'll explain that in a minute, and finish up the hair a little bit better, clean it up. But I've done all the hard stuff while it's attached to this stick of wood, so that you don't injure yourself trying to carve something this small in your hand and try to figure out an angle to hold it to where you're going to slip and something's going to go right in, despite the glove, still go into your hand. So down at the bottom, I'm going to relieve his, I guess you call it his butt. So curve all this back in underneath. Gives us the shadows that this is the whole figure. It doesn't somehow extend down into the stick of wood I started with. Okay. For all intents and purposes, except maybe for a little cleanup, he's pretty well done. And as soon as I cut this little bit off, I'll show you a close-up of what he looks like. Yeah, little things like hanging on. So, this is what he looks like now. And everything I did, you can alter in a little bitty way and make him look a lot different. So there's all kinds of options you can do. I could have played more with the nose. I've done noses that look a little bit better. I've done noses that definitely look a little worse. Okay, now the last thing you're going to do, once you're sure you've carved everything on here that you want, is that you're going to take your bandsaw and your bandsaw blade, or you can use a handsaw to do the same thing if you have a nice sharp handsaw. And you're going to want to cut right about here. So you want to go make sure that the width of the saw goes below his feet. So one side of the blade, once it's cut through, should not be cutting his feet. So you should be cutting through it. And when you're done, you should only have a little bit of this bump here that you might have to shave off and round up, but that's a whole lot easier. So that's how you separate him. And once he's separated, you get one of these little guys. He'll look like this guy, and you can see here some of this is still even there to where the little bit of that edge, because I cut below where he was, so you can kind of see the edge from where the bandsaw cut was. And again, it doesn't have to be a bandsaw. If it works better that you have a handsaw and you're comfortable cutting that close to your piece, then by all means use that. There's never one way to do it. And that's everything. And the one thing I've done on these guys, because you can see them over here with the rest of them, but is that to treat this, I seal it before I paint it, and I seal it with 50% linseed oil, boiled linseed oil, with 50% mineral spirits. You mix that up, you dip this little guy in it, take him out, let a little bit of it soak in, and then wipe the rest off. And it gives him this little kind of a yellowish color, and that makes your piece look a little bit better. And once you've painted him, there's another one that's mostly painted. You can kind of get that. If you use a thin paint, you can see some of the wood color still kind of come through on it. So you can see a little bit of the brown on that. And if you could see this in person, it may look even more so than seeing it here. And you play around with the colors. For his cap, I tried a little bit of a kind of a silvery type finish in with the this is actually red, but I thinned it down so it looks more pink. So, and I'm still playing around with them. Here's another one where I tried a little bit different color of a red. It's kind of a more of a rustic rust and red color here in the hat, which gave a little bit different color. But again, the wood tends to kind of come through, which means you're showing the world that this wasn't something made and sold at Walmart, that you did this by hand. That's all I have. Enjoy your carving.